everybody. Thanks for joining us for Barnyards and Backyards Live. I'm Jeff Edwards for UW Extension. I'm located in the southeast side of the state. And my co-hosts today are Jeremiah Vardaman. Morning, Jeremiah.
Morning.
He is located up in the Powell area. And Jenny Thompson, who you may not see, but might hear, is also joining us. She is in the Laramie area. She keeps us on task and on target, those types of things. Make sure everybody is running correctly. Our guests today are Travis Pardue. He is an assistant district forester, and he's located in Laramie. And Kelly Norris is also from the State Forestry Service as a district forester, and she is located in Buffalo. And today we are going to be talking about managing forested acres and what to do after a wildfire. So welcome, you two. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, hold on.
I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet.
Okay. I was pretty sure Jeff was just plowing on and we were going to miss all of our other introduction stuff. Sorry about that.
You thought I forgot, didn't you?
Yeah, you had one day off, man, or a week off. So I
Yeah.
figured you forgot what we do here.
So those of you who are joining us either on Zoom or on Facebook, you have the opportunity to ask questions. And if you're joining us on Zoom, please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature and type your question in, and Jeremiah and I will bring it forward to our presenters today. If you're following us on Facebook, please use the comment section, and Jenny will repost for us to pull, or she might ask the question directly from Facebook for us and make it available, and we'll get those questions asked. And again, now I think I have covered all of my duties, Jeremiah. So Kelly, I believe you were going to start first. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Okay.
And if you want to reintroduce yourself or tell everybody anything more about yourself, please do so.
Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
And it has private land management in Wyoming.
Yes.
Okay, it's the right screen. All right, well, good. Well, thank you. Again, Kelly Norris. I'm with Wyoming State Forestry Division, and I'm the district forester out of District 5. So my district covers half the Bighorns and Campbell County, Johnson, Sheridan, and Campbell counties. So most of the pictures you're going to see today are going to come from my part of the world, but it'll be fun because Travis will cover a different area of Wyoming. So to start us off, I was just going to start in a broader context of Wyoming. Wyoming has about 1.9 million acres of private forested lands. What does that mean? That means that Wyoming private landowners are the second largest land ownership of forested land in Wyoming. And that's pretty critical. You know, we have about a little over 10,000 forested landowners in Wyoming. They can range from just an acre or two to thousands of acres in multiple sections of private lands in Wyoming. Currently, we have 280,000, almost 281,000 acres that are under management plans, forest management plans. We're going to go through a little bit of that today and share with landowners, if you're not under a management plan, how you can get under one and how we can help get you there. In my neck of the woods, Johnson County, for example, that is very common. Probably Campbell County, the private landowners those forests are critical to managing the whole landscape. And that means when you're the second largest forest landowner, it takes all hands on deck. And I have a saying with every landowner I work with, every acre counts, your property matters, and we're here to care about it and help you along the way. And that's what today is going to be about.
I've got a question for you, Kelly. So I am one of those that's in an area where we struggle to grow trees anyway. So this is kind of a bizarre topic, probably for a lot of people in Wyoming, right? And we don't think of forested acres necessarily, but can you tell us what parts of Wyoming that we see these private landowners that do have forest management for those of us that might not, just to give us a relevant idea of where that is in Wyoming.
So most of those private forested lands are probably adjacent to our large national forests. We do have a significant amount of landowners in Crook and Weston County that they actually probably have more private forested lands than the Forest Service does of the Black Hills and Wyoming side. But for the rest of Wyoming, I would say the majority of our private lands are typically where you're seeing your national forests as well. So in the Bighorns, there's a lot of private property south and along adjacent to the Bighorn National Forest. Same with those areas as you move farther and farther west around those national forests and those, and around those national parks, you still have quite a bit of private lands associated in there.
Great, thank you.
Okay, yeah. And you know, when we're talking forests, we can talk about riparian areas as well. I would say they're about the same. And really, at the end of the day, let's say you've just purchased property on the mountain, or you've just your family has, or you've had it in your family for generations, and you've moved back to Wyoming, or you're living somewhere else, but you come back to Wyoming and you know this parcel of property is significant to you. The first thing to do is really to get to know your forest and know the forest that you have. So knowing the species is really important. Every species, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when it comes to fire ecology even. Different trees react to fire very differently, and different trees need different styles of management because of that. Also knowing actually your property line, knowing how to access that forested land, really important. And also just knowing who your neighbors are. Is there certain easements or things that you need to be aware of to even access your property? Do you have to go through county lands? That's all pretty important to understand and know. One of the most important things to do while you're out walking around and enjoying your property is to look for signs for insects and diseases. So look up, look down, look all around, look for signs of your trees being possibly in distress. You may not know what you're looking at, but if that tree looks different, is there something going on there? It's important to just kind of monitor and as over the years, look for those type of signs. And knowing your property is also knowing significant, important pieces of your property that may be really important to you and your family. Is there important grave sites? Is there important historical log cabins? Is there something like remnants of something that you would find very important to your property and story? I had a property owner who had the original axe marks in the stumps from when they cut the forest over. And so those are significant things to find and to know about. And when you eventually want to do something on your property, it's going to be critical to make that be known and be protected as well, if you want to make sure you protect that.
Great. So Kelly, when you're talking about just getting to know your property, look for signs of insects and diseases in your tree. You probably don't have to be a specialist to know that. Just probably clear observation of like, that tree just looks different. I don't know what it is, right? Is that what we're looking for?
Yes, that's exactly what you're looking for. Something doesn't seem right. Like all these trees look really brown to me. I don't remember them being brown last year, but they look like they have something going on with them. I can't tell, but I know there's something going on. And that's what we want you guys to be watching for, because what I recommend next is really seeking out professional assistance and finding your local forester. Foresters are here for you and to help you manage your property. They have the technical assistance, gone to forestry school, learned about forestry and what we call silviculture, and they can really come onto your property and help assist what you need with your property. And what I really want to make sure takeaway points is two things. When you bring a forester onto your property, you walk your property and start getting advice on, I see these brown trees. I don't know what's going on. Can you please tell me what's going on? And having that conversation. But it's also really important just to have a walkthrough of the property and discuss, what do you want to do with your property? I think the most important thing as a private landowner is, what do I want to do? What do I see on this property that I know it's not right, but I don't know how to do that? And that's where the forester can help you make those type of connections, and talk about your objectives. We have landowners across Wyoming whose #1 objective is wildfire mitigation. I have too many fuels on my property. I live in Story, Wyoming. I live on top of Casper Mountain. I have real concerns, and I know I need to manage. I need to manage these fuels. I don't know how to do it. Can you please come and walk this through with me? I have multiple landowners, specifically in the Bighorns, and I know Travis does down by him, that have wildlife management concerns. They know that they need to improve their wildlife habitat. Aspen enhancement is really important to us in the Bighorns, and they'll bring in a forester and say, we know we want to update, we need to manage this, and I don't know how. Recreation and aesthetics. You may have just taken over this property, you may have had it for many years, but let's say you want to build some trails, you have hunting, you want to do, there's certain things that you yourself as a private owner who's just bought that property have desires to do. Knowing that is really important for that forester. Knowing if you have real concerns about the aesthetics. I've had landowners tell me, Kelly, I want to do something for the forest health. I really want to manage. I want to go in and harvest these areas on my property, but I don't want it to be visual from the road. That is really important information, and having that conversation with your forester will help your forester be able to give you better advice on what we would recommend you do. Also, if you want a financial return, right? Like I want to manage my forest so that I get a financial return on my timber. And having that conversation about where you want to go in the future and what you'd like to see with your timber, that's really important, because that all plays into the next part, which is, what do you do next? What do you want to do next? So are we going to thin? Are we going to set up a fuel break because we got to manage for the fuels? Is your property ready to harvest? Is it time to harvest it? We have a massive beetle outbreak and we got to salvage the timber. What is it on your property? And we then move to the next topic after realizing, okay, here are my objectives. Okay, now let's walk into what are our options and what do we want to do? Specifically, a lot of times, I always say doing something is better than nothing. And it doesn't take much, right? So I want to just clean up around my cabin. Do you have the capacity to do that? Can you do it yourself? Or is it so much work? We're going to probably need to bring in mechanized equipment or a whole group of people and labor and take care of it in a financial setting where we have to pay somebody to do the work. So those type of conversations would be the next part of what you'd want to do and walk through with your forester. Because every forester you come onto your property, they're going to also know about cost share opportunities and partnerships. And that is really, really important when it comes to getting work done. So we work, State Forestry ourselves, get to work with multiple partners, and we will come and we'll bring that forester will bring those people in and help you get what you want done, even if it isn't us ourselves doing it, the foresters. So for example, many landowners have worked with NRCS, right? The NRCS is the federal branch that for natural resources that helps private landowners. And you've probably worked with the NRCS on irrigation projects. And you also have property up on the mountain, for example. And the NRCS has a whole program just to manage trees too and thin. They have cost share opportunities there. The Game and Fish, our Wyoming Game and Fish has cost share opportunities If you have a property in a specific mule deer habitat area that they're really trying to manage, right? Or they have certain habitat key areas, and your property may have that species of like aspen or whatever it may be, and that there could be real opportunities to bring in Wyoming Game and Fish to help fund a project for you. So that's
hold on, Kelly.
Yeah.
Hold on. You have just a slew of information. This is fantastic. I had a quick question. I wanted to back you up before you got too far down the track. But with these foresters, is there a cost to bring them in on your property themselves? Or is this a consulting service that is offered through the Wyoming State Forestry Division? How does that work?
So with Wyoming State Forestry, we work for the state of Wyoming. So we are a service to the state of Wyoming. And at this moment, there is no cost to call one of your offices. And we'll have, Jen, I think I gave you, we can share that. We have field offices across the state. We have 11 field foresters in the state of Wyoming that can come out and for free meet with you and help you along the way. That is what we're here for. It's a critical part of our job because just like you heard, private lands next to the U.S. Forest Service are the largest landowners there are in forestry for our state. And so if you call any of the offices, we would come out for free. Now for consultants, let's say we're really busy, because again, the beauty of being a jack of all trades working for state forestry is some of us, like Travis, will be out on fire for a very long time. And with that, if we can't get to you immediately, we do have consultants in the state of Wyoming that you could reach out to. And I'm not sure if they would charge a fee for coming to your property and providing that assistance. But you could reach out and find them and have that conversation with them.
Yeah, awesome.
And honestly, I showed you you can see down at the bottom, I find a forester. The State Forestry Division is a great place to start. Another place to start if you need a consultant and you're thinking, I have a huge property and State Forestry is not going to have enough time to like manage my trees for me, right? Maybe I do need a consultant. You can go to the Society of American Foresters webpage, search under certified foresters. We do have a small group of certified foresters that are consultants in Wyoming. But if you live, for example, in Crick and Weston County, that wouldn't stop you from searching South Dakota consultants. And same with down by Travis's area, there's consultants out of Colorado that may be willing to come up as well. Or even if up in my neck of the woods, it'd be Montana. So that's another avenue to find a forester.
Oh, thanks. And Jenny just dropped a lot of those links into the chat box and the comment box there on Facebook. So look up those, the State Forestry website and the link to finding a certified forester, things like that. Now, if I already have the idea of what I want to manage for on my property and I've set up a time for that forester, how long does that site visit take? Are we talking like weeks? Is it an hour? Is it 10 hours? And I'm sure it depends on how large the property is, but can you give us a rough idea average of what to expect there?
Yeah, so it does depend on the property. We will come out, we would probably prefer to come out with that landowner on that property and walk it with them, have that conversations with them, see what to me, it's really important to actually see what that landowner is talking about, very specific. This patch of timber is the timber I'm concerned about. This patch of timber I'm not concerned about, but you know, A, B, or C are the things I want you to think about on it. And so that could it's taken only an hour or two on a parcel that's a couple acres, and it's taken a whole day of walking in the woods with the landowner. Sometimes we don't have time to get to the properties, and I will get out to those really large ranches get the work done on the ground, get it visualized. And then I just, for example, on Monday, I went down and met with the landowners with maps on a coffee table and walked through exactly what we just kind of talked about, objectives and what are you looking for. We talked about encroachment, how to manage that, and those type of topics. And just, I know I brought up Game and Fish and NRCS's cost share opportunities, but state forestry also tends to have some cost share opportunities as it ebbs and flows with our budget. But it is another avenue. So that's another reason why it's really good to tap into your local forester.
Great. And so those management plans, are those for a year? Do you look like 3 years, 10 years down the road? How encompassing are those management plans?
So those management plans can be very encompassing. They last for 10 years and they're called the Forest Stewardship Plan or Forest Stewardship Management Plan. NRCS, I believe, calls them FSP. And so those plans really are pretty holistic. We'll take a look at your soils. We'll take a look at wildlife management, habitat, critical areas that the Game and Fish have set aside in the state of Wyoming. We'll take a look at your species, your forest health. All those things interplay with each other. Your water resources, and we'll give you maps on where your water is and the resources about, your drainages on your property if you have any. And then the next part is the recommendations. And in your forest plan, your recommendations are really based on your objectives. So every property is going to have a different management plan because every property is going to have a landowner who's going to have different objectives for their property. And so they are going to be unique to each property. They last for 10 years. And then depending on if you've had some massive changes, like if I'm going to assume some properties that, for example, that had the Mullen fire run through them, those stewardship plans are going to look very different than maybe what they looked like 10 years ago. And so that's when you bring that forester back, and it's a continuation. It's constant. Priorities change. Things happen, like life happens on your property, just like happens in everyday life. So you'll have to deal with it as you go. And a forest stewardship plan is a great document because as landowners, as you share and you go generation to generation, this is a great document for the next forester who comes in 10 years down the road, if it's not the same forester, to see what was discussed, to see what was managed, to see, here were the issues in the history of that forest. And then it really helps them set you up for the future and for the success and where you want to go next.
And so once you get this forest management plan, and we might need to move along a little bit. I know I don't want to, we have a lot to cover today and I don't want to run you short, but is there any opportunity for me to discuss that with my other neighbors? Because it's a larger landscape, right? And knowing what they're managing for, so they know what I'm managing for. And when my neighbor is maybe state land or federal land, like a national forest, is there avenues for me to open those conversations, and how should I approach that?
Yeah, and that's, so to me, that would be leaning on your forester on advice on that. Across the state, we have forest landowner days, and that brings those agencies together and the private landowners together, and that's where they get to actually have those conversations and interact. But yes, it would be your forester, if you need that connection, can help you make that connection with the Forest Service or the BLM and having those conversations. But as well as with your adjacent private landowners, we have really started working towards larger scale projects, bringing in whole subdivisions. I know Travis has done quite a bit with that, and the counties have really tried to work at a whole subdivision level when we're doing fuel mitigation in a whole area. So yes, it's all going to be a play into that and be a part of that communication, especially if you're going to do, for example, some logging. We're going to go into the implementation. We're going to do some logging. Well, for example, in the Bighorns down the Billy Creek Road, the BLM is going to have a big timber sale down there. So those Billy Creek landowners all in that area are also like, well, while that contractor's in here, I'm going to see if I can get that also done on my property. And so that's how we coordinate and say, this would be the best time to think about doing this, and this is why. And we really try and get that coordinated so everybody is in a win-win situation as best as possible. Because you're absolutely right. In Wyoming, we're far away from a lot of things. And so when we start to do something, you become more efficient when you do it all together.
So getting everybody bought in. So it's really a matter of being a good neighbor, talking to neighbors, trying to get everybody to play together and manage together, so to speak. Doesn't mean the management has to be the same, but maybe we can coordinate efforts, coordinate and pool those resources.
That's
fantastic.
Exactly, that's exactly right. So this picture is actually, this is Judy Reed. She'd probably not be happy with me putting this photo up. Too bad, Judy. No, she's fine. So this property, for example, they had a tornado, they had it salvaged. They came back, had their trees, and you can see now they're thinning it out. And this one, they did a project by hand. This was a co-op project. They started slow, they did manageable, so many acres a year. And so I think that's really important. That's our other big tip is start slow, do it manageable, try and be there if you're gonna bring in a contractor, and really lean on advice from your forester to get your projects done. If you're a first timer, especially as a private property owner. And I know we're out of time limit, so I'm going to move us a little bit faster. So I just wanted to touch on Wyoming best management practices. Wyoming best management practices, and they're sometimes called BMPs. They're a set of practices really to protect water quality and forest soils. They're voluntary in Wyoming, and they're truly the preferred way to manage forested land to conserve and protect water quality during forest management activities. So these activities are very specific, mainly to how do you manage around streams, waterways, and mitigation on roads. So in this picture, there was a huge pothole on state land. This was part of a timber sale, and we had the tree get ripped out of the middle of the road because people were making such ruts and degrading the area. And we put down new fill and cleaned it up and got it set up so when water were to hit, we were no longer having the massive runoff down the road. And so those are the type of things when you bring in a contractor to do work to think about. Is there road improvement work that you should probably be doing at the same time? Is there other things on your property you could get done while you have certain kind of equipment on your property? And that is something we try and also make sure our landowners think about. The BMPs are a great resource for landowners just to think about when they're thinking about managing on their property near streams and riparian areas. And again, I gave Jenny a copy. You can download a copy right on our state forestry website, or call your forester if you want a hard copy. We have every state forestry office has them in their offices, and they can give you a copy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Yeah, and I guess I would just end my portion of this whole conversation, just reminding everybody that every forest is different. And they're all going to come in different sizes. They're going to have different complexities, different challenges, different bugs, different fuels, different wildlife concerns. And it takes everybody. It takes you, the landowner, us, the foresters, our contractors, whether they're thinning contractors or loggers. It takes everybody. And when we all work together, we can have some really great success.
Awesome. And I think this is a great segue into Travis's presentation, but having this forestry management plan, implementing that, being prepared, as you mentioned, one of the biggest things in Wyoming is fuels reduction, right? And trying to prevent or to be prepared for that next wildfire. We just don't know when that's going to happen in our area and what it would do to our property. So I think this is a great segue. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks for providing that insight to us. And we'll switch over now to Travis and talk about what do we do after a wildfire.
Did it show up?
Yep, you're all good.
Perfect. Yep. I'll just reintroduce myself. So I'm Travis Pardue. I work for State Forestry as well as Kelly. I'm in the Laramie office, and I cover the mostly the southeast portion of the state. So Albany County, Albany, Carbon, and Laramie counties down here, mostly the Medbo route, National Forest as well. So, but yeah, I was gonna talk about what happens after a wildfire. They're becoming more and more common across the landscape as things happen and forests progress and climate changes as well. But you know, as probably not the best opinion or the the most popular opinion, that fire is good for the ecosystem. Fire is good for the landscape. We need fire. We need wildfires out there. Do we need them at 200,000 acres and burn down a bunch of homes and all that stuff? No, probably not. But we do need fire, and every ecosystem does need some type of disturbance, and that most likely is fire. Or we try to do forest management. So forest management can be a great disturbance for the landscape if done correctly. And it kind of replaces that fire that we used to have on the landscape a couple hundred years ago and we got rid of. A great thing to look at is in this picture here. This is from the 2020 Mullen Fire in the southern part of the Snowy Range in southeast Wyoming. And what's burning back in that back picture there, and what's so intense and the huge flames is because it's all subalpine fir. And what it used to be, all those stands used to be quaking aspens. Used to be an aspen dominated stand. And so what it is that aspen and your pine trees, your lodgepole pine, your ponderosa pine trees are pioneer species. They're the dominant tree species on the landscape. They want to be there first. They want to dominate the landscape. And your fir trees and your spruce trees are your sessional species. So they're trying to take over the forest always. So we had the bark beetle epidemic that came through. A lot of the fir trees came through, started to encroach it. We took fire away from the landscape. The fir trees came in because there's nothing to get rid of the fir trees. And eventually, in this picture, all those aspen stands turn into fir stands from this process of how it happens. The problem is that those fir trees are just a dried out Christmas tree out there in the forest. We all know what a Christmas tree might do in our house if it caught on fire, or even if we get rid of it after Christmas. It burns hot and intense, a lot of resins, just extremely, doesn't need any sun. It's really shade tolerant, so it can grow in the shade and in the understory and really flourish. And so that's a big problem that we're seeing these days, and why we're seeing such huge fires, especially in these bark beetle killed forests in Colorado and Wyoming as well, like we've seen here in the Mullen Fire. And there's several different things. We're having such bigger fires these days. It's the climate, it's the longer summers, it's the lack of forest management we've had the last 20, 30, 50 years, and the miss forest management before that. But I'm going to talk just briefly about some things landowners can do after a fire came through, and basically this will relative to the Mullen Fire from 2020. And so just to give you background, the Mullen Fire started early middle September of 2020, dry climate. We had actually a very big snowstorm in early September, and then 2 weeks later we had the largest modern fire in Wyoming history currently in the statehood. There's been larger fires before the statehood happened, and we really good data records, but this is the largest fire in Wyoming history currently. And this started here. The reason it got so large is the fuels, the drought conditions. We had several big wind events that came through. You can see, most people remember the 25th and 26th of September, where it burned 50,000 acres in a 2-day period there. And what happened there, we just ran out of fuel to burn. It ran into the Squirrel Creek Fire from 2012, the Badger Creek Fire from 2018, the Keystone Fire from 2017, and just ran out of fuel. Or it could have been, it probably would have been double the size. So
Travis, that's the benefit of that management plan, right? Is if we can already go in and reduce that fuel load prior to that fire coming in, and even if maybe my surrounding area around me hasn't had fuels reduction, my property, if it has experienced that, I have a chance of that, right? That fire may lay down on my property, or it might not be as severe on my property. Is that a fair statement?
Yep, that's definitely a fair statement. We, Kelly and myself and all our other foresters, we push very hard for adaptive forest management for this reason exactly. It does work, and I'll show you some pictures, and later on in the presentation that some landowners have done very good active management on their property, and then the mold and fire burned through there, and you could see the difference from places where that was not managed to where it was managed. And it's you're right, it definitely depends on how much work a landlord does, and not just on the forest side, but on the housing and the landscaping around their house, the materials that they build a house with, and all that stuff as well. It's all a combined effort to try to help save your house and property. But like we talked about, it is a landscape approach. We need all our landowners, whether that be in the Forest Service, the state lands, the private lands, the BLM lands, we all have to be on the same table and same page for doing cross-boundary work. Cross-boundary work is that we have one project that continues from the Forest Service onto that private, onto the state parcel, and we have some great opportunities these days, and some great authorities and agreements that we're working with the federal government to help us expand those projects from just not private or state to the Forest Service and BLM and everything else we can do. So
if I understand that right, Travis, those type of projects are whatever type of project it is, thinning project or logging project, whatever you have, but you're trying to make that so as off of private property or state lands, you're actually going into Forest Service and getting them a part of it, or onto BLM, and making it a larger footprint on the landscape, but also providing some protection along those private lands. Is that correct?
Yep. Nope, that's correct, because we can't, fire doesn't know no boundaries. Insects and disease know no boundaries. They don't know if it's Forest Service or state or private. They don't know no boundaries. So yes, we are able to, and we're very active down, and Kelly is too, in different parts of the state. We're very active with our Forest Service, our cooperators, the BLM, and we are doing numerous projects currently through the Good Neighbor Authority project, which allows us, the state, to hold contracts that cover Forest Service, BLM, state, private grounds, where we can have one contractor go and do the work across all those landscapes, all those private properties, different land ownerships, and it's working out great. That's what we needed, and well, it's going to keep pushing forward, and I think it's going to really open up a lot of projects in the future, and obviously we have some funding probably coming down to us here in Wyoming, and be able to do a lot more for the citizens of Wyoming.
Awesome. So what's next, Travis? Let's say a fire does come through. I'm looking at your slide here, adapt, recover, restore. So what does that look like?
Yeah, adapt, recover, restore, right? Unfortunately, mold and fire was pretty devastating for a lot of landowners. Lost 62 structures, about 32 of those were homes, all secondary homes, which is, I know it's still a bummer to lose anything in a fire, but they're all secondary homes, and but we have to do something, right? We have to restore that landscape, especially in the high burn severity areas where there's no trees left, there's no grasses, the soil has been burnt and scorched, and we got to protect the natural resources after wildfire. So we got to do that erosion control, and that we'll get into that. That's putting in contour falling. We stopping that erosion before it hits the stream, before it destroys a road, takes out a culvert, plugs up culverts, plugs up dams, or anything like that. And then unfortunately, if we have to rebuild structures, well, let's rebuild to more fire resistant materials. Let's, if we have landscaping, make sure those are fire resistant landscaping materials. Do we need a plant? Do we need a grass seed? Do we need to get weed and pests and our friends there and help us do some noxious weed control? Do we need to look at how we can rebuild our forests going into the future? Do we need to do some more thinning, take out the dead, take out the burnt trees, all that stuff? So there's a lot to it, and again, here we're all here. State Forestry and our partners are great resources for the landowners, and we'll kind of look into that more.
Great. Just so you're aware, Travis, we got a question on where to source trees to replant. And I believe, if I remember your presentation enough, it's coming up. So we're going to get to that question.
Yep, correct. Yeah, so erosion control, that's a huge thing. That's got to be the number one priority. It's usually about everyone's number one priority is what we do, especially on those steeper slopes. This picture here is from the mold and fire, private land. If people know that lower Keystone area that got burnt pretty heavily there. And, so we call this contour falling, where we take the burnt dead trees and we follow them with the contour of the property. And we try to put that tree on top of like stumps, where the stumps will hold up the tree, or rocks in there from that tree so it doesn't slide down the hill. And then when it rains up top, we know what happens if there's no grass, there's nothing to hold that soil back. When it rains, that soil is going to wash down the hillside. And so going into the next picture here, that's why we do contour falling. So when that erosion does come down the hill, it's gonna hit one of these logs and it's gonna stop. It's gonna stop that erosion from even happening or going to the stream there, because there is the Douglas Creek drainage there behind this block here, and we don't want all the sediment going into that stream. And so if we don't have any of this contour falling or contour or holding anything up on that landscape, all that soil on top of that hill is just going to wash down the hillside, and then we lose all that nutrients, the minerals, anything to grow trees back. And then it leads to further problems when that's erosion of the soils get into the streams, and then that affects our watersheds and everything downstream from there. So
great. Jenny just threw some good links into the comment box and the chat box. So look those up. The link to the more about the Good Neighbor Authority, and then also some resources, a link for resources on what to do after a fire, some possible financial resources that Wyoming State Foresters has provided us. So look those up, looks fantastic. What else, Travis?
Yeah, so the big thing is, we don't have all those, that's a lot of things like, what do we do with all these burned trees on our property? And this is the best thing we can do for right here. Get that material on the ground, especially for the erosion control. And then in the flatter areas where you can see in the background there, we can pile some of that stuff and try to burn it and get rid of it. We just want to, especially with lodgepole pine trees and lodgepole pine country, the cones on those trees are shrotnets. So that means they're closed up. The cones are always closed up. Everybody's probably seen the cones in the forest and stuff. And what those cones need to pop open is heat, either direct sunlight or fire. That's why lodgepole pine loves fire, because those cones, the fire will burn through there and open up the cones. And that's what will happen. And we'll see here later in the slideshow here. So the more sunlight we can get on the forest floor, the better. And because that will help out grow back the grasses, the trees, everything else. So if we can get the trees off the landscape, doing some erosion control and getting some stuff where, another thing is here, the more some of that slash we can get on the ground or the trees, when it rains or we get big snowstorms, it's gonna not just pelt the ground. We're gonna limit that erosion, control the droplet. When the droplets hit the ground, we don't want that soil to splash out and move and stuff. So that if we got some ground cover with the slash or the trees, that's gonna slow the movement of water down the hillsides or just on the floor as well. So people ask, well, how long do we hold that up there, or we leave the trees on the ground? It really depends. It depends on how well the grass comes back there, the trees come back. We just want to make sure that we have something there that's going to hold the soil in place before we remove that. In some places, we don't need to remove it. Those logs on the ground will provide really good protections to seedlings growing up, those little lodgepole pines growing up in the future. These logs provide great protection for those. And those barriers on the ground, it's a great way to hold the snow back a little longer in the springtime before it all melts off and runs down into the stream and stuff as well.
So just slowing things down, letting it soak in, not let that water run off, and hopefully over time it'll rehab itself, or maybe we need to assist it with its rehab, but setting up things appropriately to do everything we can to just hold things in place until new regrowth. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. Exactly. And then, obviously with erosion control, we probably need to put some grass seed out there. We got some grass seed mixtures. We want to make sure we get the correct grass seed mixtures. There's different grasses that grow from the high elevations down to the rangeland. And we just don't want to go to, say, Walmart and pick up a bag of grass seed that we want to plant in our front yard and try to plant it up here. It's not going to work. It's going to do more harm than good, which will lead into some other discussions as well. But as long as we can get something growing, and this landowner had not put any grass seed down. This is all grass and vegetation growing back naturally. And so some areas where it's not growing back, they'll go out and put some grass seed down, either in that spring, like late May, right before a late spring snowstorm is really good, and let that snow melt the grass seed into the ground. That would help out a lot. or we can do it late fall, right before that big first snow that's going to stick around throughout the winter.
So Travis, the forests are in general pretty resilient, right?
Some good opportunities there. So right grass, right. We don't want to put grass out there. So, but
Go ahead, Jeff.
sorry, must be pretty glitchy still. Sorry about that. So in general, the forests are pretty resilient. And they will recover on their own, even though it might not look pretty for a while.
Yeah. Nope. They're made to recover, right? Forest, it's Mother Nature's way of cleaning up. Fire is a good tool for her to clean up the forest and have regrowth. We all, we do need regrowth in the forest. We just can't have the same trees and species out there forever. Yes, the forests are really very resilient. And we'll get into some pictures where, really have lodgepole pine seedlings coming up 10 months post fire, which is incredible, especially in high burn severity areas. We're already seeing the forest come back, the aspen trees, the grasses, the forbs, the lodgepole pines, they're all growing back already. So the forest is very resilient, and but there are some things we can help, obviously, help it along, especially with the grass and the erosion control, because if we didn't do any erosion control, we could probably see some very big flooding and some mass waste erosion control problems.
So you mentioned severity of the burn, Travis. Does the severity of the burn or how intense that fire went through, does that have any ramifications on recovery efforts?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I should explain that. So the burn severity usually is as high, moderate, and low burn severity. So your low burn severity is going to be just a fire kind of skunked through an area, kind of burnt some of the pine needles. You have little spot fires here and there and stuff. The most of the forest is still intact, really didn't lose any trees, didn't really lose a whole lot of grass. The grasses might have burnt a little bit here and there. You really don't have to do any much erosion control or even recovery in those areas, because it's going to come back super easy naturally. It's just like doing a prescribed fire. You're going to see those grasses come back first, and it's going to really flourish in there. Your moderate burn severity, you're probably going to do some erosion control. You probably lost a decent amount of trees to mortality from the fire. A lot of some of the topsoil, the nutrients is burned off, and you probably good idea to do some recovery there. And then your high burn severity is what people think of a fire. For every fire, it's like everything's burned, it's all black, every tree's dead, the soil's gone, it's sterilized and stuff. And really, typically, that's only 30-40% of a fire. Burn areas, a lot of it is low to moderate burn severity. We have, and you're going to find those low to moderate burn severities in the areas where we did do treatments or we did logging, clear cuts, management of the landscape there. And your high burn severity is where nothing's been done. We have that continuous fuel loading, tree to tree to tree. In those areas, that's where we focus the most on doing the erosion control, the grass seeding, the tree planting, anything to help on that forest as we go along.
Great. And recovery is not always fast or easy, right? It's faster than what we think it is. But I'm just looking at your picture here, and I think you got some comments coming up. I think that's the next transition of talking to our weed and pest and how to approach things that might not be going the way we want it to.
Right. Yep. And so, usually we're going to have, we hope for after fires that we get the fireweed that comes in, the wildflowers that come in after wildfires, the grasses, the forbs, but, sometimes we do get the noxious weeds, and you can see, thistle is, a lot of people don't think thistle is that big of a deal, but it is still a noxious weed and we still need to control it. And we do have other noxious weeds that come in. I'm not a weed person or grass person. That's my least forte. I can tell you all the tree species for sure. But the noxious weeds, I know they're out there. I know what to look for. And, we still need to do something, because the Canadian thistle will, outgrow the grasses and take over the area, especially in the burn areas. And if we can get weed and pest out there and help us out doing some weed spraying, that will help just accelerate that recovery as we move along.
Awesome. What's next in our recovery after a fire?
So housing, right? Unfortunately, people do have to rebuild homes after a wildfire. It's a bummer. Nobody ever wants to lose a home in a fire or anything really. But we want to make sure, if we are rebuilding, let's look at fire resilient materials, housing materials. Let's look at some siding, some landscaping, some roofing material that's gonna help us a little bit. It's not fireproof, right? It's fire resilient. So hopefully it can slow down the fire. It gives us a little bit more time, a little bit of a buffer to say if we have a flame front of the house to maybe to hopefully not just burn it all at once. We know we have a little bit of a leeway there, a little bit of a buffer. So this house was in the Foxborough subdivision in Mullen Fire, which is up by Fox Park, and where we've seen the most damage to structures. We lost probably 28 to 30 of the 40-ish homes, so quite a bit of devastation there. But this house, luckily, the housing materials is what saved this house. They had that concrete composite siding, which is pretty fire resilient. It's like 200-300 degrees before it will start to disintegrate. You can see their roofs are metal, their vents are all covered up. And then you can see and below the house, you can see that they had all that area, between the house and the forest floor there, or the ground, it's all covered up. So those embers, right? It's not the flame front that catches the house on fire, it's the ember wash. So if you have one ember, get under that house, find some insulation, finds a pile of wood under that house, it sits there, it smolders, and then it catches the house on fire. But if we have this nice skirting around the house, at the bottom of the house, that could be plywood, it could be very, fine mesh there, that helps and it keeps out the embers there. So having good siding and good roofing materials. They also had a drive around full gravel driveway around the house. That helps as well. The fire can't, creep on the ground and hit the house that way. And you can see this picture. So this is the house. And the next picture, I just did a 180 from where I was. And you can see how hot that fire got before it hit that house, right? So 100% tree mortality, all their neighbors' houses burned down, but then their house made it, right? So it's a 180 turnaround there. And I could only imagine how long that flame front hit this garage and it didn't burn down. So that's incredible. So if we can, because the fire's not done, we'll have more fires on the landscape. We'll have more fires up here. Let's rebuild. If we're gonna rebuild, let's use that fire resilient materials. So let's make sure the landscape, the special trees, there's special grasses, there's special, if we can get rock around the house and we don't need grass, we don't need trees right next to the house. Let's look at that. Let's be smart moving forward here and try to adapt is key. And
keeping the flammable materials away from that structure, right? Not stacking our firewood right up against the house, like you said. And it doesn't have to be a lot of rock, right? Maybe 2 or 3 feet of rock around the house, and then it can go to vegetation from there. But any little buffer we can help. And then those building materials is the key.
Right. Yep. And because most of their house, they had to replace most of their windows. So it's so hot, a lot of the windows either broke or cracked or flexed, enough where they bubbled. A lot of the siding bubbled up a little bit in place and stuff. So you can imagine the heat, but how good that material is to hold back and not catch on fire.
That's incredible.
So crucial. Yeah. Yes, it is. It is amazing. The materials that we've come a long ways today, and you can see, under the eaves here of the garage, it's all nicely covered up where the embers can't fly under the, the eaves there. I tell landowners, like, if you're up there in the wintertime and that wind pushes the snow around, and wherever that snow goes or drifts up, that's where the embers are going to go in the winter and the summertime, especially in Southeast Wyoming, where our winds are the same all year round. Wherever the snow goes, the embers are going to go. So if you get up there in the wintertime and look at that, that snow gets under the house right there, maybe we should do something for there. That's a great chance there to try to protect it. So this little things to try to prevent fires from getting on the house. Because like I said, it's just one ember. That's all it takes. One ember to land on a couch cushion or one of those cushions that we have for our outside furniture. We all have a nice outside furniture out there. We have those cushions we sit on. One ember catches that cushion on fire, catches the deck on fire, catches the house on fire. It's just such minor details that it takes.
And that pre-planning, right? This is when you're re-siding a house or re-roofing a house, or this is the time to look at it before the fire comes, and it might benefit you. Yep. We're running a little short on time, Travis. Yep. I think we're right on time, actually, but we probably want to get through all your slides before we run out of time.
Yeah, and all this, I'll kind of breeze through this. Like Kelly talked about, any forest management we can do, the thinning, the field breaks, the field treatments, getting out there and educating landowners is so crucial. You can see that this is before we did the treatment on the left-hand side. We thinned that out for the landowner. The fire burnt through there. We lost some trees in there, but we didn't lose all 100% of the trees. So anything does definitely help in there. Active management is crucial. It slows down if we can slow down the fire enough where we can get ground crews in there, air resources or anything like that to help slow things down. It's so important, so crucial for us to have that opportunity, that chances. And then, this is the same landowner. They completed a field break. So this is what it looked like before. And then, we thinned it out, created that field break, give a little bit of buffer. Field breaks are great, crucial along roads because it gives us that extra room there. We can use the road, we can use the field break, and adds in, 20, 30 feet with the road. And if we do a fuel break for 100, 200 feet off the road, adds that buffer in, allows our fire resources to get on the road and try to stop that wildfire there. Gives us chances, or it slows down the wildfire. In this case, it slowed it down. And so that's after we did the management, and then that's after the Mullen fire came through there. And so you could see in the background of that picture how hot it burnt, how bad the intensity was behind that. But once it hit the fuel break, it slowed down the intensity. That fire dropped because it wasn't going, behind there, it was going tree to tree to tree, a full crown fire that everybody sees that we see in that first picture here. But once it hits its fuel break, those canopies are spaced out. We're not touching, the tree canopies aren't touching anymore. Allows that fire to drop down to the forest floor, creep around. Once it hits the road, it slows down. Unfortunately, there wasn't a continuous fuel break in this area where it would slow down and helped in other areas. But you could see, here, it's thick, untreated forest, treated to fire, and how crucial, these projects that we do are to slowing down a wildfire. Can't guarantee that's going to stop it, but it can slow it down and help us out, help fire resources out, try to stop the fire.
Especially if that subdivision is downwind of this, right, to the left of that road. I mean, that's kind of the concept, is if you can protect those structures in this manner. We can't protect it from all sides maybe, but, the more prevalent areas or potential dangers. Yeah. Yep. Great. Exactly. What else?
And so, so then we go, we talked about, the forest is very resilient. It'll grow back, it'll come back. Sometimes slower than other things, or it might come back more with grass and shrubs at first, but eventually it will recover. And we got to think, I tell landowners, think as a forest is like a garden, right? We have to nutrient it, we have to thin it, we have to pull those weeds out, right? But forest is a garden that's over several hundred years, right? We have to do the same thing. We have to go in there and thin it every couple of years. We need to go in there and say if we get some insects and disease, or we get some beetles in our garden, or something that kind of kills off some stuff. Same thing in the forest, right? But it all recovers. It all continues on, and we just have to nurture it like a garden. And so this picture here is that same area in the Mullen, 10 months post fire, and those are all aspen trees that are growing back there, growing out of the rocks and growing out of areas. This was a previous aspen stand that had been severely encroached by conifer trees, and the aspen trees had been dormant pretty much. But once the fire came through there, it allowed those aspen, because aspen loves disturbance as well, really needs disturbance to get new growth coming along. And that's what happened. Fire came through there. We got regrowth coming through. The aspens regenerated there. And this was in June, and I went back in September, and they were already 3-4 feet tall. So wow, if there's aspens in the ground, they will come back. Even if we haven't seen them for several years, the root systems will stay very active in the ground and eventually pop up once we get that disturbance coming through.
That's incredible.
Yep. And so that leads back to a lot of landowners asking, like, well, did we plant trees back? What did we do? And I don't want to see my neighbors. I don't want to, see anybody. I want a forest, and I want it today. I want it tomorrow. I don't want to wait 10, 20 years. And it goes back to the garden thing. It takes time. Forest is like a garden over 100 years. It takes time to grow trees, right? We have to have a small tree to get to a big tree, to get to a large tree. We can't just buy trees and plant them and be 100 feet tomorrow. It's a slow process. If you want a fast process, fast growing tree, got to move to the West Coast because we don't have the moisture, the nutrients like the West Coast does, where the trees grow 3-4 feet a year. We're lucky if a tree here grows 8-9 inches a year, if we're lucky. If it's thinned out well and all managed well, it can, but not likely. And so this picture is last summer after the wildfire again, and all those little things popping out of the ground are all little lodgepole pines. So that fire came through. It opened up those shrotness cones from the lodgepole pine, right? We talked about those shrotness cones from the lodgepole pines that are closed, and then they open up when they get the heat on them. So those cones opened up, the seed fell to the ground, and then we had the sunlight and enough moisture. Those seedlings started to grow out of the ground here. This is 10 months after fire, right? Pretty incredible. So to plant trees, we want to make sure that we have the right tree species, right? We want to make sure we're getting the tree from the right location. We don't want to go to Home Depot. We don't want to go to the Dollar Tree. We don't want to go to Walmart and buy the cheapest thing they have there just to have something in the ground, because 99% guarantee it, that tree is going to die, that shrub's going to die within a couple of years, because we don't know where that tree was sourced from. We got to make sure the trees that we are planting in these high elevation areas or anywhere in Wyoming that they're sourced from the right area. They're growing, they're raised up in the right area. And a lot of that trees that we plant in Wyoming come from Colorado. Fort Collins Nursery is a great place to buy seedlings and saplings and all that stuff to plant. And there's some few other places too, and we can get those resources out to landowners that need it to plant trees coming back. But I honestly, I would say let Mother Nature recover herself. And if we're not seeing trees within 2, 3, 4 years coming up in those areas, we could probably go and plant, a few trees and get some stuff going here. But in 15 years in this area, we're not going to be able to walk through that forest because there's going to be so many lodgepole pine trees. They're going to be so thick. It's going to look like Yellowstone, right? We've all seen pictures of Yellowstone from the 88 fires, all those trees. You can't walk through there. It's going to be the same thing here. And then we're going to be begging the landowners again to thin out those trees because it's going to be thinned out again. So
Travis, sorry to interrupt again. In cropping systems, we talk about plants per acre. And I think you mentioned it earlier in your presentation. In a healthy forest, are there numbers of trees that you all recommend per acre? Is it, I know you have different trees in that acre. Is it, if you had a solid stand of something, would it be 500 trees an acre? Is it species specific that you're looking for?
Yep, species and size, right? So the smaller a tree is, the more weak trees we can have on the landscape. So how we at the state, if we're managing a straight lodgepole pine stand on a state parcel, those trees will grow up and they'll hit about 5-6 feet tall. And then those trees will become the dominant ones and co-dominant trees. And those are the ones that stick out a little further. If you look out across the area and you can see those dominant ones kind of growing, we choose those ones over the other trees. And we're looking at that time. And so that's probably 15 years probably since those trees started growing. And then we thin those to a 8x8 spacing, which is about 640 trees, 680 trees an acre, just depending there when they're small, right? And then we'll do another thinning when they're 40 years old, say, and we'll space them out to 12 to 15 feet spacing then, and we're getting down to 300-ish trees per acre. And then, later on, so the bigger the tree is, the less trees we want on the landscape, because there's only so much water, so much nutrients out there. And the older the tree gets, just like the older person gets, the harder it is to compete with the younger generation, the younger trees, for that water and nutrients, the same thing. So yeah.
The older I get, I'm still going to compete with the younger generation for me.
Yeah. But same here. What you're saying, Travis, if I understood you right, there are specific nurseries that we want to source our trees from for a forest rehabilitation project. That's different than if I'm in a residential area or in town. I can get those trees from those other nurseries or Home Depot or that, because it's a more managed management of that tree. They're going to have nutrients, water. We care for them and baby them. These trees need to be specific to the area, going to be grown at a certain elevation, possibly in the nursery, to have a better chance of growing and surviving. And these type of rehabs, you plant the tree and Mother Nature has to take over, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, and we don't want to plant big trees. We don't want to plant 5 to 6 foot tall trees because they've been nurtured for 2, 3, 4 years by then, that they're relying on that water even more. So if we can plant smaller trees, they're not so reliable on a human watering and nutrient. And so we just got to be careful, and we have to be careful on the species of tree too, right? We don't want to say take a ponderosa pine tree and go plant it at 9,000, 9,500 feet. It's probably not, it might do okay, but it's not the right tree species, right? We want to make sure that we have the right correct tree species for the area that we're planting the tree. And so high elevation stuff, the lodgepole pines, spruce trees, that's what we're looking for, because that's what the wildlife's used to. That's what the soils are used to. That's what everything else is used to. That's what the ecosystem's used to, are those tree species. And when we try to introduce a different tree species into that ecosystem, it's going to throw out of whack. And we have done enough harm to Mother Nature. We've done enough harm to all our ecosystems that we don't want to throw it out of whack even more. And so we got to be careful of the right tree species, the size of trees, where we're getting those trees from, all that stuff.
Right. And it's a little, what you just said, it's counterintuitive for probably the average person if you didn't have the training and knowledge beforehand. But seedlings are the way to go, right? Because you have a higher chance to success of them being established and becoming a big tree compared to putting a 5 foot, 6 foot tree in the ground. I've seen research on that, and it's crazy that a smaller tree actually can establish quicker and actually over time outgrow and outcompete a bigger tree. And that is so counterintuitive to what you think. You think you're doing good and getting a leg up. Jenny also threw in the chat box, really appreciate it, Jenny. We have local conservation districts in every county. Look up your local conservation district. They are a possibility for sourcing trees, but you need to tell them what you're doing so they can help guide you to the right tree for that as well. What else, Travis? We're after 11 o'clock, which is fine, but let's wrap things up a little bit.
Yeah, that's really it. I mean, there's a lot of different avenues we can do and recover and adapt and moving future. I know I always tell landowners, like, you can't look in the future or look behind you, right? We got to look forward. We got to look in that, that windshield. We can't look in the rearview mirror. And it sucks to have the damage done to your property and the house and that stuff. But like, let's be smart and let's build for the future, right? Let's adapt and overcome and do what we know right now is best for the future. Because whatever we do now, it's gonna be for your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, right? That forest is 100, 150 years old. We cannot adapt. We cannot try to manage for tomorrow. We have to manage for 100 years from now with the forest. Where as a garden, you can manage for tomorrow, or for a week, but a forest, it's 100 years out, at least.
Yeah, this is a long-term plan and long-term management and consistent. The one thing I was thinking when you showed that picture of all those little baby trees coming, we now need to start our management plan over again, possibly. Maybe not completely at ground zero, but we got to restart. Is that fair, Kelly?
Yeah, and what I tell my landowners, specifically with lodgepole, is to wait 5 years. That it's really important, just like Travis said, this takes a lot of time and it's not our lifetime. And so I really stress before we invest in trying to replant, or start getting concerned because we don't see seedlings, it is very difficult for the first 5 years to see those little seedlings from the human eye. Most of the time, they really try and establish their root system first before they sprout up and shoot up. And so again, I just say, hey, has it been 5 years? How long has it been since we've had that disturbance? Let's really take a walk through before we get too concerned and start putting a bunch of time and investment into planting, because typically, just like you saw with Travis, that last slide with the seedlings, they do come up and they will come up. What's nice about that picture is there wasn't any grass. It was after a fire, but many times if we're doing management activities, we do have grass still in there because we didn't have a fire. And so that's when we want to just double check and really look for those and give it time. So, and that your management plan will most likely have those recommendations in there as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Hey, Travis, let's look at your video. You had a video to show with that. But before we get to that, jump to that right away, just want to say, for those that are jumping off, usually they're only committed to us for an hour because they got other things to get to. Thank you so much. But Jenny threw in the link, an evaluation. Please give us your feedback on these shows. It really helps us out. But we got I think it's about a 2.5, 3 minute video here of the Mullen fire, just to kind of reiterate and show some of those points that we talked through today. So go ahead, Travis.
Yeah. Yep. So this is a video all pertaining to the Mullen fire in a house that burned down, unfortunately. And we're just looking more towards how we talked about. It just takes one ember to burn a house down. It's not the flame front. Typically, it's the embers. I would say probably 90%, 95% of houses that burn down are just from ember wash. And ember wash is all those little pine cones, those little needles, those little branches and stuff that are flying through the air that we see. Is it not playing? There we go. Sorry about that. That we see, going through a fire, and they're on fire. Usually they're hot. And when they hit something, hit the ground, hit a structure, they start catching on fire because they're hot enough, and that ember will catch a fire, spot fire, or catch a house on fire. So this video shows that, and shows how crucial it is with your housing materials, what's on your deck, is there a screen protecting around your skirting around the house there? Is there something to block those embers? Is there, what's on your deck and everything else there? So it's, as we watch the video, you can kind of see as it goes through the event of September 26 is when the fire came through here. 70-mile-an-hour winds, 80-mile-an-hour winds. Couldn't do anything with the fire. We can't fly aircraft, can't fly helicopters, we can't have ground resources in there because the fire is moving so fast and so intense that we just can't put anybody's lives at risk trying to save houses or anything. Did it stop playing again?
I don't know. It seems to be stuck on that text.
There we go. My apologies. So we had permission from the landowners. They were very gracious, and this is all caught on game camera footage that they had. And actually, the game camera didn't burn down, surprisingly. So, and you can see this house, this cabin, had a pretty good defensible space around it. It had done most of the stuff. They could, obviously use yearly maintenance. Something that we've talked about in the past on this show and the magazine as well. And mowing the grasses, pruning up the trees even more, getting stuff away from the house. But you can see, in this clip here, you can see the flame front behind the house, right? Super close. Those trees are only 30 feet away from the back of that cabin there. And the cabin's still, standing there. It's not burning, but it's hot, super hot, right? And you can show how intense that fire was burning through this area. And you can see how intense the winds are. Don't look at the time or the date of the camera. Just look at like the temperature there. And so we're 95, almost 100 degrees there, and the camera is probably 100 feet away from the actual flame front. And this is what I was talking about with the heavy ember wash. We can see all those embers flying around there. It's so smoky. It's so intense there. The fire behavior and the smoke, you cannot see anything. But this is what most likely started that house on fire. It was the embers coming through here. You can see down on the corner there. And the next clip will show you the couple spot fires that had started next to the cabin there, either dry grasses or a stump or something like that. Those stumps are really crucial because they really catch embers very well because they're dried out there. They're usually standing up a little higher. They can get those embers and catch them on fire there. So you can see there a couple embers had started a spot fire there next to the cabin there, and kind of this slowly skunking around there. That main flame front had passed by now, right? We've seen that main flame front that came through there and the back there, and then burnt through and moved on, to the next forest parted. And that left a few spot fires there around the house. And you can see the spot fire there on the deck now. So one of those embers caught the house on fire, unfortunately. And this being a log-sided house, the deck was log-sided. The deck was all wood. It wasn't that nice composite decking material that we have now. That's something to think about too. So you can just see how fast it does happen. And it is just the flame front, it's just the ember wash that catches most of the houses on fire, and it's not the flame front.
That's crazy. If I saw that right, it said 2 hours and 6 minutes, and that cabin was down. It was completely burned to the ground. That's incredible. That's
Incredible, huh?
unbelievable. And just one little spark, one little ember that flew off in that wash and started the deck on fire. Is that right?
Yep.
And hit the wrong place.
It stayed in the wrong place.
Yeah, unfortunately. And so that's where it's like, where we need to do, we can do all the defensible spaces that we can around houses, and that's great, but we need to do the rest of the property. We need to tie back into what Kelly did, get that management plan and manage, 90% of your property, 95% of your property, especially small 2 to 3 acre lots. We need that whole property needs to be thinned out and managed for that wildfire spec. Especially, I know people don't want to see their neighbors, they don't want to see houses, they don't want to see people when they're in the forest. But unfortunately, when a fire comes through and burns down all the trees and the houses, there's really nothing left after that.
And that's the importance of those building materials, getting the right building materials in there. Who knows, but possibly that cabin might have done better if it had the proper materials on the side. As you said, that flame front passed through there, and that fire on the cabin was well after the flame front. So it wasn't the flames that blew through that got the cabin. It was that ember wash. That's crazy.
Right.
Not something you think of. Well, great. Yeah, the best management is just proactive, right? Get involved with the Wyoming State Forestry Division, get involved. If you neighbor Forest Service, right, or BLM, go in and talk to those foresters there and be aware of what projects are happening in the area and try and collaborate. And anytime and open up those conversations. That is the best thing that we can do. Well, fantastic. I don't see anything else, Jeff, or did I miss anything, or are we good?
No, I believe we're good.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to close down the show. Unfortunately, we're at the end of the show. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly and Travis, for taking your time out of your day and bringing us this great information and getting it out to our clientele here in Wyoming. I just want to reiterate for everybody, thank you so much to our participants for hanging in there. We really appreciate everything you have. Whoa, I'm going to stop them a little bit. We just got a question that jumped in. Going back to the post-fire rehabilitation, what are your thoughts, experiences with no-till seeding to help reestablish grasses?
It's in a forest setting, it's going to be really hard to try to till or break up the soil because there's so many the stumps and all that stuff in there, and it's hard. I would say you could use a rake to try to rake some of that grass seed in to get some of it covered up. Especially with the birds and stuff, they're going to try to come eat the grass seed or the squirrel. It's that way. Or I think the best way to wait for a good snowstorm and get that seed put down before the snow hits, and then let the snow, especially if you can get a good wet spring snowstorm, let that snow melt that grass seed into the ground there. I'm not against tilling it like that, but I just think it's going to be tough, especially in a forest setting, to do that.
Yeah, that no-till equipment is going to have a really rough time in that type of country. Logs in the way, stumps in the way. Yeah, you're really limited on what equipment you can get in there. Broadcast seeding is the most common that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
If you can get equipment in it, you might be able to do some hydromulching, but that's pretty expensive, especially in remote areas. But yeah, just broadcasting that using Mother Nature. If you really need some exercise, get a raking crew out there and rake it in. No, right. Sounds good, Travis. Yeah, I appreciate it. Wanted to catch that before we closed out, but thank you so much for everyone. Jenny, if you wouldn't mind throwing up the B&B website. Shows like this, we record them and post them back up on the website, and then all the resources and links that we pull, we try and do a great job of putting that on the recorded with the recording. So it's a one-stop shop. You guys can find it, click on it. If you're wanting to know more, right, we have other resources coming, other shows coming up. We have the schedule there for B&B Live for this spring, so look that up as well. Anything on there, it's all a one-stop shop there for you. The other thing is the Barnyards and Backyards website is just a treasure trove of information. That's what we call it. There is lots and lots of information there for you. Some on wildfire issues and topics. We have articles, videos. resources. We're just trying to connect you with as much and as many resources as possible. And we really appreciate it. Jenny has also thrown up the district map for the Wyoming State Forestry Division. Look that up. Get in there, talk to your foresters and help them help you manage your property, right? Also, you can look up your county conservation offices and things like that. UW Extension offices, we're a great resource to help connect you to these other resources. So look us up. The last thing, I already mentioned it, the evaluations. Jenny threw those in a link in the chat box and in the comments box. If you have a chance, fill that out. Let us know how we're doing. Help guide this show because we are truly doing this for you. Jeremiah and Jeff really enjoy, and Jenny, I should say, really enjoy doing these shows, but it's not for our benefit, it is for you. So please give us that feedback. And with that, enjoy your Friday. Travis, Kelly, thank you so much. We'll see everybody later.
Thank you, guys.